Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and in this episode, I want to talk about the notion of us living in an and world instead of an or world, okay? Now, before I fully dive in, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So let's get into this. I think, especially nowadays, we just make the world so binary. This or that, us or them, right? And in that way, we just need to stop because it's a point of comparison. It presumes one thing over another when, the idea is two things can be true at the same time, And so just kind of adopting and, right, into it instead of this or that. So let's get a little specific, It's like what, for example, Gary Vee often talks about like, what's better to collect, baseball cards or, comic books. And it's like, well, they're both good, right? It depends on the person, ultimately, right? Like, what is your passion? Part of like really accepting this as being self-aware of where you fit in, right? So that way, part of it is the outside world will try to make these comparisons onto you, right? And try to create a distinction of like, okay, which are you, this or that? And it's like, don't buy into that, just right off the bat. I mean, for me, I try not to be labeled in any sort of way because I have a lot of interests, and the stuff that is not of interest to me is not a negative reflection on the activity or whatever. It's just not for me, and I recognize that. So in that sense, I like soccer, and I like filmmaking, and I like making podcasts, and I like going to movies, and I like dogs, right? So it's not this or that. I can have all of these things, Now, in just saying that, I should caution, like, it's not like, I think in that sense, we get strung up on this idea that like, okay, then you can have it all, and then we overwhelm ourselves when it doesn't kind of work out that way. And I'm a big, and I know this is kind of taking a side tangent, but I think it's important all the same, where, I oftentimes people make a list of all the things that they want, right? And for me, I say, okay, great. Focus on just a few. And it's not to say you can't do those things, just not right now. That'll come. I don't know if it'll come in the next 6 months or whatever, but in time, you can then do those things. Not everything has to be right away. Right? So you can still have ands, you can, let's say be a host and a musician and a writer, and so forth, just maybe not all at the same time. And in that sense, part of it is, in the early, like in a lot of ways, especially with like the entertainment industry as a whole, and it's less so now, for sure, but still there's that kind of notion of like trying to pigeonhole somebody into a specific thing. And I'm sure you can think of examples, probably in your own life where you're like, that didn't feel right. It's like, why am I'm not just that, right? It's like, I'm that and I'm this. And it's, in that sense, it might be a harder path forward because just, the reason why the world likes a binary sense is because it's much easier to understand. It's much easier for the mind to process of like black and white versus, all the shades of gray, the nuances of life. It's why we're very good at finite thinking instead of infinite thinking, which is, ultimately what life kind of really is. I mean, it's not to say that we live forever but just the idea of, our lives kind of, are ongoing, and yet we think of, we just try to, I don't know, we just can't get beyond certain things and think beyond X. It's why a lot of people are terrible future planners, because, we can't get outside of our own immediate needs in the here and now a lot of times, right? But it's like, once you start adopting the and world, it's like it becomes more possible. There's a way to both plan and be secure for the future with your finances and, retirement funds and so forth, while at the same time having a little bit of fun, once you start kind of looking at it in those ways, you start to strategize for how to accomplish both, and yes, like it is a little bit of a balancing act, like you can't, but in that sense, it just leads to a much happier and healthier life, in my opinion and my experience, because, I have the sense, like just thinking about finances in general, the knowledge that I am contributing to my long-term future gives me a sense of security, but I also don't cut myself off from fun that I enjoy in the here and now. And that to me is great, And again, does that mean like I can just go to Vegas whenever I want, or, just spend endless amounts of, no. But, that was only in the whole of it, right? It was just going to bring more misery. But again, and that brings me to the idea that like we're just not good at thinking beyond finite terms, right? But an and world allows you to do that. You can think about the here and now and also the future. Both are possible. And there's many different perspectives with this, right? There can be a political perspective, there can be a creative perspective, there can be a relational perspective, whether with your friends, with a significant other, with parents, like all of this stuff, right? It's a simple concept, yet it has sweeping ramifications if you really start looking at the world as an and world. And really, ultimately, right, as kind of I hinted towards, it's looking at the shades of gray and seeing the nuances of life rather than trying to make things binary. Because life just, unfortunately, isn't binary. And not unfortunately, in fact, I'll take that back, because I think it's fortunately not binary, because that's what makes it so much interesting. And I think we get lazy in trying to group those things, and then we don't take the time to get to know ourselves, to get to know other people. We just say, oh, this person's X, and therefore, they're either, I either agree with them or I don't. That's not interesting. And we write people off in that way, or things, or whatever. So let's stop doing that, and let's see things for what they can be. It's one of these, like, here's another example, I see a lot of people that like feel really guilty about having fun because of all the suffering in the world. And I get that. There's a lot of suffering in the world. But there's a way I think you can still be happy and also care about and do something for the plights of the world, right? The things that are going on. And in fact, my argument is that should be happening, because it's like to just focus on the negative aspects of what exists. It's like, then what are we ultimately fighting for? We have to have something that's worthwhile, And I think the best way to inspire people is to lead by example, And it doesn't mean just careless partying and so forth, but I think, yes, that joy in life needs to be experienced. And when people see you experience that joy in simple ways, it gives them permission and it shows them a roadmap. And you have to help, and to see that there are parts within even our neighborhoods that are not so lucky. And so what can we do, right? So it's that and that. So these are just a few ways that I consider you know, an and world versus an or world. So it's definitely a lot to unpack. So my hope for you is after listening to this, you kind of sit with it and form your own thoughts. You know, I gave you a lot pretty quickly, but just really reflect on it, as I will too. You know, once I'm finished recording this, I'll kind of digest everything as well. And, you know, it's something that I do think upon quite a bit, actually, you know, and in all the ways that it applies. So, you know, do them. And in fact, if you would like to share any of your thoughts based on like what comes to mind, please do so in the comment box or hit me up on social media at Svitek. I think we all stand to benefit, you know, me included, by you doing that. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. I hope to see you next time.